A good evening and a warm welcome to our latest Beyond Radley Talk, a virtual talks programme showcasing a variety of perspectives from experts in the Radley community. Tonight, we're focusing on the topic of how to launch a startup without losing your mind, because it can be an emotional rollercoaster of risk, uncertainty, long hours, and an incredibly steep learning curve. The unrelenting pressure to succeed, fear of failure, and the volatile nature of the startup culture can take a great toll on the mental health of founders. In this talk, old Radleyan, Charlie Lass, will tell us about his journey since he left Radley, some of the lessons he's learned about the founding of his businesses, and how he feels entrepreneurs can and should take steps to preserve their mental health right from the start. Now, before we hear from Charlie, I'm going to hand you over to another old Radleyan, Rory Codrington. Rory dropped out of university to build his first business, an angel-funded extreme sports app, before moving on to found Trust Keith, a data protection service, in 2019. Rory is familiar with the pressure of a startup world and will be interviewing Charlie and handling the Q&A session at the end. Please can I remind people just to keep their microphones on mute so that we can hear the speakers. And if you want to ask a question, we'd really love it if you'd put it onto the chat. And then Rory will field those questions at the end and give them to Charlie. Please remember the event will be recorded so we can share it with others who are unable to attend today. Now, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Rory. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. Evening, all. We've kind of got probably about 45 minutes or so of me asking some questions to Charlie. Then we'll use the last 15, 20 minutes or so to run through any questions you've got. So just keep them coming in. But to kind of tee up Charlie and why you should listen to him. Charlie is a serial entrepreneur. He's had successful exits in the UK and the US. He's currently working on Dallas Inc. and Humble Inc. And he's previously worked as a founder of Viapost. He was a CEO of Control Point, the CEO of the Comparison Company, and a co-founder at the Open Energy Market. He attended the Harvard Business School and MIT Sloan School of Management, where he's currently a senior lecturer. He's also a mentor for Capital Factory, Techstars, and Mass Challenge, which are sort of early stage accelerators for funding and startups. So very well equipped to give some perspective on this. But to kind of kick things off, I think I'll hand over to you, Charlie, maybe to kind of share your high level journey since you left Radley.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. It's great to see some familiar names on the participants list. So hello. Yes, so entrepreneurship is not the traditional route for a Radleyan. And as a Radleyan, you have arguably one of the best positionings, best educations available. You can pretty much do whatever you like. You have the resources, connections, and education that far exceed most of the planet. Some ORs feel this is quite a lot of pressure, and it weighs on them. And I'm not going to delve into that now, but the opportunities are boundless. And one of those things that you can obviously pursue is a career in entrepreneurship, and it's not to be taken lightly. And what I want to do today is to dispel some of the myths, answer some direct questions, and talk through a little bit of practical advice as to how to manage it. I've always been an entrepreneur. When I left Radley, I went to the University of York, where I became obsessed with films. I then went to do a film degree at Goldsmiths, and then I launched a film production company where we made very terrible short films, but very good adverts, which funded the creative side. Because I've never had a big boy job, I never had a paycheck to walk away from. I think it's been easier for me, but it's not a side hustle. It's a career. It's a job. And I remember in the past I was laughed at by someone in the UK when I described myself as an entrepreneur. It is an extremely lonely, extremely stressful, but ultimately can be incredibly rewarding career path. When I switched from film to tech, I've always been a technophile, and I love what Radley's been able to produce. And I'm a huge supporter of the robotics club, the robotics program there at Radley. Launching a film or a play is very similar to launching a startup. You have to find the right people, you have to have a good idea, you have to find the money, you have to make it, and then you have to sell it. So you have you have to be the jack of all trades. From anything from janitor to financier. It doesn't really matter where you are in your startup journey. But I would like to focus on the more famous, the more traditional kind of concept of what a startup is, which is the investment funded tech company. Not all startups are created equal. And being an entrepreneur can be anything from launching your own hair salon to a VC-backed global behemoth like Uber. Freelancing, solopreneur, entrepreneur, consultant, those are all things that fit into the entrepreneurial model for me. And having seen the US and the UK climates and thrived and suffered in both, I've got a lot of experience. It's been 20 years of doing this. The lowest point was February last year, where I had a nervous breakdown. And this came off the back of many years of stress, uncertainty, huge amount of responsibility, and then the additional piece of supporting 14 families for my team through COVID. And at the end of it, I snapped. But it was actually the best thing that ever happened to me. It gave me a complete factory reset on my mindset for work, and allowed me to take a really long earned look back on what my career was doing and how to do it. So that's why we launched Humble, which is the antithesis of LinkedIn. It's Google without the bias, LinkedIn without the bragging, TikTok without the lies, and YouTube without the distractions. And we're trying to help people globally understand what launching a startup really is all about. So, Roy, do you have any? You said you had a couple of questions lined up.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Well, I think, over the last 20 years, you've kind of been through that sort of entrepreneurial ringer, so to speak. Do you want to maybe share some specific examples of those lowest lows or some of those highest highs, just kind of flavor
Yeah,
it
I
in a
think
bit?
that people go into it thinking that it's going to be easy, but it's a very good way to get rich. It's actually a very good way to get poor, frankly. Motivation is more important than anything. And in those moments where you're staring at the ceiling at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, you're going to wonder why you've chosen this route. There are many times in my career that I wish I'd just gone and joined Deutsche Bank or something and be partner by now, and that would be a lot easier. There is a certain misconception of glamour behind the whole thing, that you could create a system, create a company that earns you money sitting on the beach in Thailand. And that is possible, but it's not the norm. The norm is that it's feast and famine. You will go for years having, if you have a decent exit, you don't need to work for a while. You see your bank balance has got all the commas in the right place and the numbers are in black, not red. Makes a bit of a difference. But there'll also be moments where you can't pay yourself, you can't pay your team, you don't know when the next bit of investment is coming along. And so in those moments, which every entrepreneur I speak to, and I've been involved in the strategy and tactics of the early stage of about 500 different startups, and being part of the entrepreneurial community in the UK and the US, I get access to founders who, all of which, now I think post-COVID, people are talking more about the stress of it than they ever have before. It used to be something that it was just hustle culture, don't stop, work 60 hours a day, all that kind of stuff. But you burn out, and everybody eventually does. It took me quite a long time to burn out. But the conversation is now turning to actually protecting your mental health. And I know countless founders who have suffered at the hands of their own hands because they just don't stop. A friend of mine, his company is now a double unicorn. It's based in Dallas. It's worth $2 billion. And he said that the most noticeable thing he got out of the whole experience was a drinking problem, which kind of sums it up. Like, he's never going to have to, his grandchildren will never have to work, but it's kind of ruined his life in the process. And entrepreneurs are, various studies suggested, they're 5 times more likely to have mental health issues, to be suicidal, to be depressed, to have substance abuse issues. Bipolar disorder is 10 times the normal population, ADHD, all of this stuff. And whether it's the career and the context switching create that, or whether we are drawn to it because, who knows? But the reality is that very few entrepreneurs set out with the knowledge that this is going to be stressful and lonely and isolating.
What do you think some of those other misconceptions are? Like some of the ones I see quite a bit is around just how long these things take. You can kind of get, roll into your first business or something like that with quite a misaligned expectation of how long it's going to take. Like, right, in and out 4 years, it's going to be $1 billion, whatever. And then you look around and you realize that it takes 8-10 years to get, what other misconceptions have you seen?
Yeah, so that's a big one. That it's quick. It's not quick. It's not easy. Leo Messi's got that great line. It took me 17 years, 144 days to become an overnight success. And that's the kind of thing that applies to entrepreneurship as well. It is a grind. It does take years. And going into that going into your business with that mentality is a really healthy place to start. One of my early mentors in London said it's going to take you twice as long and cost you twice as much. Actually, he was wrong by a factor of about 10. It takes way longer. I think the most important thing there is if you are resilient as an entrepreneur and you have control of your business and you are enjoying what you do, then that bit isn't as much of an impact. The problem starts when you start asking for money and you have early stage investors who are expecting or you have told them, oh, in our exit strategy is 3 years time, we're going to IPO, we're going to sell to somebody. Like that's when the real problems start, is because you have set expectations of other people who have invested and it's not going to align like that. And any really experienced investor won't ask you what your exit strategy is because everything changes and the original business is probably not going to be the same thing. The company name may not be the same thing. The products will adapt based on what your customers want. And the customers are really the only thing that ever matter. And I don't think that social media is a good reflection on how an entrepreneur is doing. There aren't really any metrics as how you can evaluate yourself alongside another entrepreneur. Is it money? Well, maybe. Is it fame? Possibly. But really, it's so isolated that you don't have these standard metrics. You don't like suddenly make partner or something as an entrepreneur. You have to use your own internal validation and setting off in a path where, oh yeah, in 5 years' time I'll retire. It's never going to work like that, because your customers will tell you what they want, and you don't know. One of the biggest bits of advice I give is that the idea that you have at the beginning, your first idea, the thing that you think other people want is almost certainly wrong. And you know this as well, that your first idea is crap, but you need your customers and the market to tell you what is actually any good, what they want. Don't build something that you want unless lots of other people want the same thing. Build something other people want and test it and test it and test it. And so many people set off and they're like, oh, I can't share my idea because someone will steal it. People don't steal ideas. And even if they did, that means it wasn't protectable in the first place. So they've probably done you a favor.
One of the other kind of things in there around how long these things take, but also like you say there around that first idea never being the true thing, is that sense that there's just so much constant change. And there's never oh, right, we're going to get to this inflection point. We've launched this product. Now it's just scaling. It's like, no, every 6 months, things are breaking, whether that's you scale, from 10 people to 15 people, things break. You have to like constantly resetting and resetting. And I think it certainly took me I've not finished any sense of that kind of adjusting to it, but that sense of constantly, it's never done, which can be quite a frustrating world to be in.
It is never done. It is never done. The only person I can think of who actually is done was the guy Tom, who started MySpace, who sold it for $500 million and then vanished. Which sort of brings me to the point where there is never this halcyon moment of an exit. And we all set off and think, oh, all I need to do is just to get to this bit. I just need this much more funding. I just need to get to here. Or when someone comes and buys us, then everything will be great. But it doesn't happen like that. And I liken it to being an artist, a creative, extreme creative. If you're an artist and you sell one of your paintings for an amazing amount of money, that doesn't mean you don't have a warehouse full of 100 other things that you're sort of half working on. So the idea that it's done it's finished and you move on. I've never seen an exit where the founders were elated or investors weren't a little bit frustrated. There isn't this moment. It's just do the best you can, but there is never this moment where you're like, oh, fantastic, I'm now on a yacht. It's always gradual. It's never as good or as bad as you think it's going to be as well.
Another thing as well is around the realities of like what a good outcome actually is. Like it's very easy to kind of look around and you might see peers who are raising some like 10 mil Series A or their headcount's like 60 people or something. And it kind of looks and like ticks all these boxes of what you perceive success look like. But what you're not seeing under the hood is, well, there's 3 rounds of dilution they've gone through as they've raised funding. They've got a massive option pool. The new investors have come in and said, actually, you've got to re-earn all your shares over the next 4 years.
Right.
And then there's some like down valuation or like all these other things that come together that are just a fraction of what you might be led to believe. And that actually, whether you self-fund or not, or you build a business that as a founder, maybe you can pull a couple of 6 figures out of the business. Like that's really where the kind of the lifestyle unlock, I think, actually comes from, not some like ginormous exit.
Yeah. I think that it comes back to it being, it is gradual. If you've got a profitable business that can keep going, then you've got the time and the opportunity to chase that valuation or grow the business. I mean, selling something, if you make $1 on it and you've been able to sustain it for X amount of time, then brilliant. That's a win. And actually, in the UK as well, we have it's fascinating kind of being on both sides of the pond to understand the different perspectives. In the UK, if you fail, you're a failure. And in the US, some funds will not invest in you if you haven't crashed and burned before. So playing it safe here versus the UK isn't necessarily the same thing. But if you can say that you built a business, you built a product, somebody else wanted it, then you sold it. That's great. It's a huge success. You've built something. You've created something from nothing, and somebody else wanted it. That's amazing. The challenge really comes when I mean, Radley puts out professionals at an amazingly high level. The lawyers, doctors, accountants, all of that. Jumping ship from that career, if you've been at PwC for 15 years and you're suddenly saying, right, darling, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to build this app. Like, it's chaos. You're switching careers. It's not some side hustle. You're not just building an app, whatever it is. You are changing the entire focus and structure of your life.
Yeah. And I think one of the things as part of that is, I guess for both you and I, Charlie, we've kind of rolled straight into doing a business. I haven't kind of got used to a salary or just sort of any salary creep side of things. But the longer one waits, or the longer the one says, "Oh no, wait, I'm going to bank 4 years at PwC, and then I'm going to go on my own," but the later you wait, the more responsibilities you have, and the bigger risk it's going to feel like.
Right. Absolutely.
But then it's never going to be the right time ultimately, anyway, to start a business.
No, it's not. But it does take guts to jump ship, to move that. But success, go back to that earlier point about exit. You don't have to be a billionaire to be a successful entrepreneur. In fact, with Humble, which we're actually like, we don't want to support billionaires. Like, we don't need more Elons. We don't need more egos. If someone could create a business for themselves and their family that wasn't incredibly stressful, that brought in £500,000 a year, everyone would say yes to that, because that's an amazing situation to be in. But we have this sort of hustle porn. You're chasing these massive, outlandish, chaotic ideas. And great, there need to be people doing that, but it doesn't have to be everyone. And so, slightly removing the romanticization of the billionaire mindset, the taking over the world, and I've got a huge mega yacht. You can make money doing an incredible variety of things, and build yourself a very nice life, and live quietly without having to focus on being, a centimillionaire.
What do you think some of those other kind of softer benefits are running one's own business that aren't directly correlated to, okay, wow, I'm now employing 50 people and doing sort of 5 mil of ARR? If you're, one thing that comes to mind for me is, even at like a relative baseline of success, you suddenly got control of your time, whether you want to work a 4-day week or whatever it is. What do you think those other lower hanging viable ones
so
are?
that's the biggest thing. So there's a number of studies been done about the motivation behind people launching their own thing, and money actually doesn't come very high on the list. I used to be a director of the MIT Innovation Initiative, and we did a study that said that number 7 out of 10 is the financial benefit, because if you're just chasing the cash, you might as well sell fidget spinners and be done with it. But if something goes wrong and you don't have that motivation, you don't have that drive behind it, then things are going to be a little harder. But yes, you do have complete control of your time, which is a blessing and a curse. You know, I'll be, you know, I'll take a Wednesday morning off, and my wife will be going to work, and she's like, "What are you doing?" So I'm like, I'm not doing anything. And there's sort of, well, you're being lazy. Well, you're not, because I'll be thinking about this 100 hours a week, and I need some time to go and do something else to change the scenery. So that the time to yourself and not feeling guilty about it, if you can manage that, then amazing. You are creating something. You're building something, an idea that came out of your head. You're solving a joy, or you're creating a joy, or solving a pain. Like, that's incredibly satisfying. I saw, it was one of the best moments of my life, actually. I was walking down an area near where I live in Dallas, and someone was wearing a Humble t-shirt, like swag that we've made and sold, and someone was wearing it. I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. Like, this random person I've never met has bought something from us. It was amazing. So that feeling is great. Seeing satisfied customers, getting great feedback, helping people, you know, whatever the motivation is, that's the really satisfying thing.
Absolutely. And you mentioned there are a few, I guess, low points. You kind of spoke about your breaking point. What sort of tools or kind of ways of working have you kind of established to, I guess, create a bit more sort of mental stability, or just sort of emotional stability, given, you know, what's a very up and down sort of career?
Yeah. So I was, the consultancy firm that I have, it's called Dallas Incorporated. It was launched with the mayor of Dallas, and provides a service to people launching an idea, and we take an idea to market in 30 days. So we have this ultra rapid, very expensive process where we will realize the foundational dream that someone has, so they don't have to quit their job and do this themselves. We do it for them, and then a month later we give them the keys to their business, primarily technology based. And the average startup in the US costs about $250,000 and takes about 12 months. And we do it in a month, and then give the keys back, and then provide advice. Now, something happened in that business. Two of my team, my key people, went and worked with a client that we've been working with for 6 months. They bailed, and I realized that I was left managing a lot more than I could handle. But it also came at a time of year where, you know, it was February, March, where, for whatever reason, over the past few years, March has been a time where something big has gone, you know, cataclysmically wrong with the business that I've been running, or I've been, you know, pushed out of a company I was part of before, and all these other things. And it was probably 10 years in the making, but it was in that moment where my brain was like, nope, we can't do this anymore. Because every year around this time, you have to dig yourself out of a hole and keep going. And my brain was like, no, this time we're sitting this one out. And it was an amazing situation to be completely non-functioning. Like, getting out of bed and going for a walk was a massive win. And it started me off on a path of asking other entrepreneurs how they have felt. And I was by no means alone. So many of my peers who have had, you know, who on paper shouldn't have to worry about this kind of thing. You know, we've got the resources, we've got the experience, fine, but the pressure builds over time. And if you're not careful, if you don't look after yourself, you prioritize the business and you hustle too hard, eventually, you know, the batteries will run out. And I've had some horror story conversations with some of my mates, my peers, that, you know, in the most depressed state they can conceive of, that they feel like total failures because their business is their baby. It's what they decided to do, and if it fails, it's very hard to not take that on and make it all about you. The business fails, therefore I'm a failure, or I haven't got this compared to. Comparing yourself to other people is just a recipe for disaster. What is it, the phrase? Comparisons is the thief of joy.
But I think
And
that in particular is something that's so easy to do in startup land because of, I guess, one's always talking to investors. You're always playing that comparison game. And I think it's really hard to detach from having so much of your self-identity mapped to that business that you've started.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that particularly it happens around um, fads. So 18 months ago, 2 years ago,
Mm.
NFTs, before that, crypto, this year, AI. And, you know, you see these stories. There was one, and this actually it genuinely annoyed me. This company raised $105 million on a one-page PDF. And I was just enraging. Now, the problem with doing that, if you raise your series seed, for those who don't know, that's the very first round of external investment or pre-seed potentially, but seed round, you are valuing your company at $500 million straight away, which means that to exit at any kind of useful valuation, you've got to be selling for billions. And that's a lot of pressure. Like not many companies do that, especially when you know the market and the industry is uncertain. And I saw that and it was incredibly frustrating. Like these clowns can raise 105 million on a post-it note. And you head down this wormhole. Well, why haven't I been able to do that? Why, you know, what is wrong with me? Why, you know, people don't trust my vision, or the business is wrong. I'm wasting my time, and I'm, you know, I'm old and failing. Whatever your choice is of self-flagellation. Like you can find it. You can by looking at what the apparent success of other people's are. The show reel of these startups is
Mm.
way more toxic than an Instagram show reel where someone's on a beach in a bikini. Great. This is your career. And so seeing somebody else who finds it so easy or stratospherically successful by, you know, they're a billionaire by the time they're 15. And if you're not, then no one's going to love you and your dog's going to hate you. It's so easy to just disappear down that wormhole because you don't have the community aspect of being able to talk to other people in your situation. If you're the founder of the company, you don't have a peer. You don't have someone else you can talk to because you don't want to share all the bad bits with somebody. And so therefore you can't, you know, you can't vent, you can't work it through. You don't want to take it out on your family and your spouse. And being family and parents or spouses of entrepreneurs is very difficult.
Mm.
So you know, you have to set your own boundaries. So to answer your question a long way around, in the same way that other people with a traditional 9 to 5 go to work for 9 to 5, and I know things have spilled out over the last few years, but I set very specific boundaries of when I work. Now you're thinking about it all the time, but like go to work with intentionality, sit down, like this is what I'm doing. One space. Stephen King talks about having one very particular place where he goes to write, and he'll when he's in the right mode, he'll thrash out hundreds of pages. And I think that's really important. Yes, you can work in a coffee shop. Yes, you can work on the beach, but actually protecting your sanity in your mind space by having a consistent time and start time and
Mm.
end time is really important.
Agreed. One thing that I've done, I think, probably this time around, so the last 4 years, is trying to surround myself with a bit more of a support network, whether that's a business coach that I meet with monthly, or I'm part of this founder group where basically 4 of us meet up for 2 hours once a month. We're all at kind of roughly similar stage, but it's this kind of no judgment kind of call where you can kind of talk through your latest challenge. And it's likely to be a
Right.
challenge that, particularly if you're a sole founder, you can't really share with the team. You can't share this people issue
Right.
or cash flow issues or these other things.
Right.
So being able to kind of vent, get feedback with people who are really in the trenches as well is pretty
Yeah.
powerful. Are there any
So which
communities you're part of at the moment?
well, that's actually one of the things we're trying to solve with Humble. We're trying to provide a judgment and troll free environment where you can ask advice from a series of people that you don't necessarily know. So there's an app out there called Cameo. We're doing part of what Humble is something similar to that. You can ask an expert something without judgment and without fear of reprisal, and they don't have to be in your network. They're part of our network, and we provide that to other people. So there's also a group that's launched. It's growing in popularity around the world, and Caroline mentioned to me about swearing, so I'm going to be careful here. It's called F Up Fridays, and you meet wherever it is, and you say this went cataclysmically wrong. This is a problem. I made a huge mistake, and it is an open forum to talk about what went really badly wrong. Also, we're seeing This is very cathartic. I've been to two of them. They're amazing. Which is startup funerals. When it's like, okay, we're done. This is awful. I'm stopping. And you have this moment of like, you literally put it in the ground and you watch people, mourn the loss of their startup and the last 10 years of their life, and it didn't work out. Like, right, okay, let's have a funeral. So those conversations are happening. The challenge with the traditional business community, and there's a number of great ones in London. 3Cs is a fantastic one that I used to be a part of. Unless you are, as you say, at the same stage, possibly within the same industry, there aren't many people out there that can relate. And your business model, by the definition of you launching something new, whilst the business model might be familiar, and hopefully is, the product and the situation in the market will be new. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it. So, therapy is another great. I mean, we're working with a number of UK and US psychotherapists who are essentially entrepreneurs in their own right. They've started up their own practice, but they haven't necessarily talked through the day-to-day challenges or the ongoing stress of entrepreneurship. They haven't worked with entrepreneurs per se. So we're actually connecting those communities together within Humble as well, because it's so important, even if it's just an event, because you can't constantly talk to your family and friends about it, because your family doesn't want to be bombarded with it, and they don't deserve that. They've gone through enough of it. And your friends, they won't be able to relate for the most part. And that's what I mean about isolating. You can't, with such different careers, it's very difficult to talk to your mates about what the process of entrepreneurship is really about. It's also quite easy for them to disparage it. And I've seen this, sadly, is where, well, oh, you're an entrepreneur. You get to do whatever you want whenever you want. You can do. You got your own time. I have to go to an office. You get to work on the beach. I don't really. What problems could you possibly have? You own the business. Suck it up. Like, okay, but yeah. So the isolation there, and then when you do end up in situations with, if you do make the mistake of working with friends, which I would never recommend, is that if you have a successful exit, then you're even further isolated, because it's quite easy for jealousy to creep in. And to your point earlier, but the headline may be exits for 25 million. The reality is, which you're never going to share, is that after 9 stages of funding, option pool, dilution, partnerships, you end up with like 1%. Exaggeration, but people don't see that bit. And even if you told them, they wouldn't believe you. So that they only see the headline. So, you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. But it is worth it.
Thanks, Charlie. I think there's a few things we've kind of covered here around, I guess, maybe more realistic expectations going in based on your experience there of kind of doing it for the last of 20 years. A few of the highs and lows from being booted out to adding 7 comments to your bank and surrounding yourself with that kind of founder community to kind of normalize some of these conversations. One of the, I guess, anchors for this event is around how to launch a startup. Do you want to share maybe your kind of advice around that kind of 0 to 1 phase? If you're either a recent grad, say, or maybe you're already early in your career, but you have these aspirations, like what kind of advice would you be giving?
Yeah. So I actually, I thought about this obviously before. So a few bits: set boundaries for the way in which you work and the amount of time and money that you'll spend. Be realistic with what you're offering and be flexible with the feedback that you get. You have to be open to being told that your idea is terrible, because it inevitably probably is at the beginning. But if you find one customer, you can find 10. If you find 10, you can find 100. And there will come this moment where that first version, that iteration that you start with, will click with someone. And that market validation, which people so often overlook, and I've been more than guilty of it in the past, with a comparison company. Great example. So we all know Money Supermarket and Go Compare and all those things. I launched the comparison company in the US, which is that for every utility. Now, in the UK, you wouldn't go and search for car insurance without going through one of these sites. In the US, it just doesn't work like that. The states are all different. The pricing is different. Some people don't operate in different areas. And also, consumers don't think to do it because it's not a commonplace thing. So we built a price comparison site for every utility in every state and launched it, and no one cared. No one wanted to use it. We even launched it in Spanish, comparacion.com. And like, okay, why is no one? Because we were wrong. We built something that a different market wanted and used and was familiar with, and we thought it's obvious. This is fantastic. I'll just launch it, and it's fine. It's great, but it didn't work in the way that we thought it would. We were wrong, and because we didn't validate. We went and built something that we assumed people wanted, and they didn't. So market validation as cheaply and as fast as you can. People don't steal ideas. Just get it out there. Get someone you don't know to say that they would buy something, and ideally to actually buy it. It's very easy to set up a website now, get the messaging broadly what you like, and put it in front of people and see what they say. If someone who isn't your mum is saying, you know what, I'll buy that. That's a great idea. You're off to a start. That's a great place to be. So setting those boundaries, not putting yourself at risk. In the earliest stages, it's very, very tempting to take on debt. Debt is dangerous. You can't go out of business if you don't have any debt. And if it's a side project, you're testing the water, you're trying to validate. If you're not burning lots of money each month, you can stop, you can slow down, life happens, other things will come in the way. So don't take on debt right at the beginning. I wouldn't work with friends and family. When taking on investment, be totally transparent. It's very, very simple. I've seen lots of people do it, and they say, "Oh, this is happening, and the guarantee this is going to." And the investors are listening to what you're saying, and they're putting faith in you. And if you're not being completely transparent, it eventually will come out, and you might end up in a lot of problems later. I've seen a lot of people do it. I mean, look at, FTX or Elizabeth Holmes or all of these people. Basically, most of the Forbes 30 under 30 have ended up in jail because they're just overselling, and people want to believe in this prodigy mentality. But no, being realistic is going to be a lot. It's going to help you stay sane, stay calm when the bad things happen. And I guess also this is a bit contrary to what people would normally expect. Go slower than you want to. It's very easy to start spending the money you have or pushing in a certain direction or chasing a certain metric. But if you get big success in one area, you are going to be missing out on something else. You can't do everything at the same speed and the same level of quality. So just slow it down a bit, because that's where you're really going to see the path you're on. And the analogy that I've been told before is that you're driving on a road and you floor the accelerator and you're suddenly doing 500 miles an hour. If you are off by a little bit, you're going to be in the trees. But if you're gradual, you can actually steer the car in the direction you want it to go and adapt to the conditions around you. So just taking it a little bit more slowly. Don't compare yourself to other people. The show reel of Instagram is 10 times worse when it's your business and your life and livelihood. So don't believe the hype. Those would be some immediate thoughts.
Nice. I think that comment you made there around sort of being realistic, whether that's to investors or whatever, I think it's this quite tricky tension, I think, as an entrepreneur to balance around making a promise, whether that's to investors about the growth you expect or to a customer, particularly early days around, we're going to build this functionality, and backing yourself to kind of make it happen. And you see there's plenty of extreme examples, whether it's at the Fire Festival, where it's completely gone the wrong way. But there is that healthy tension, I think, particularly if you're starting with like a lean mentality of, okay, we haven't got much money. I'm going to go and pre-sell a pilot and I'm going to back myself to kind of deliver on that over the next 6 months or something. It's kind of a thin line for sure.
Yeah, it is. But the costs of getting that MVP, that minimum viable products, the costs of that have come down into the hundreds. Rather, anyone still at Rally now won't get this, but it used to cost $20,000 to build a website, and now you can use Squarespace and take a couple of hours and put something, or you can use ChatGPT-4 and have it done with the picture. So you can validate the concept very, very cheaply, and that's where people should start. And there's an obsession with, it's got to look perfect. Perfectionism is the enemy of done, and it's the worst thing that most entrepreneurs are guilty of, is trying to make it absolutely ideal and perfect. Oh, if I just did before I send this out, I'm going to share. Like just yeah. Sadly, it's totally natural. It's ego. You don't want to look foolish. You're like, well, I should know better than it. Especially the further along you get with your career. You know, if you're just starting out, it's like, oh, I'm just starting out. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to make mistakes. If you're a seasoned entrepreneur and you start to make some basic mistakes, then it's a bit embarrassing, and people are like, well, hang on, you should know better than this. So there's a juggling act there, but just get something in front of someone that you don't know and get them to roast it. Now, I'm not saying immediately like put it on Reddit, because like that's a sport for those people, is to, you know, rip people's ideas down. And also the British have a mentality of, if you're trying to better yourself, you know, some people try and drag you down, which is a bit of a shame. The Americans have got a very different attitude, which is just like, yay, positivity, like probably totally unrealistic positivity. But putting it in front of someone else and saying, this is what I'm saying, this is the problem I'm trying to solve, or this is the joy I'm trying to create. And people, it's important to remember that investors, social media, your friends, your family, none of those people really matter. It's the customer that you're trying to provide for that matters. And people, you know, even entrepreneurs are humans, even VCs are humans. That people buy something on a sliding scale of fear or greed, and you've got to be as close as you can be to the ends of those things to get that quick validation. And the example I would use, you know, why is an Aston Martin more valuable than a Prius? Because it provides additional intangible value, so therefore it's more expensive, and there's fewer of them. It's a rarity. Look at me, I've got an Aston Martin. Or home insurance, like, or car insurance. Expensive car insurance is based on fear. So if you find what your customer, what their pain is, or what the joy they're trying to find, and that's where if you're in the middle, the customer doesn't really know what they're doing. They don't know why they're doing it, and it's a murky world for competition. You get substituted for other things. You get confused with other companies. But doing one thing really well first out for as cheap as you possibly can, that is the way to start, and don't spend a huge amount of time on it. And in different parts of the UK and certainly different parts of the US, I mean, Dallas is a great example. Dallas is it's not a very expensive place to live, and therefore it's not a very expensive place to run a startup, which means that bad ideas last longer. Whereas if you're in San Francisco, you've got about 45 minutes before you run out of money. So you've really got to be on it. You've got to provide something very quickly, as cheap as you can. And using that mentality, like, don't look at what other people are spending, because they have different structures. Don't immediately start, incorporate your company and off you go, because that actually doesn't matter. You need to have the validation of the idea from someone you don't know first off.
Thanks, Troy. I'm just looking at some of the questions. Maybe
Awesome.
turning that question around a little bit from your advice side of things to, I guess, retrospectively to yourself. You 20 years ago starting off with a film business and whatnot. What sort of advice would you give yourself?
Kind of embarrassing thinking back at my early career. You know, there was a lot of energy and a lot of optimism, and a lot of mistakes that I could probably have learned from other people before I just sort of set off. Like, off we go, here we go. I'm going to be shooting first. I wouldn't change the level of energy and effort and optimism, but I would slow down for sure. I also, with Viapost, we on certain metrics, we were a breakout success very quickly, and that definitely went to my head. And so I would tell my 27-year-old self to shut the hell up and sit down, because it went to all of our heads, and it became this reinforcing loop of, we've got this money, we've got this valuation, we're amazing, blah blah blah, and then, you know, it didn't pan out like that. You know, we were featured on front page of the Financial Times, and we were like, we've made it, yay! And like, you haven't. Like, you've got to actually now execute on this thing. And actually, the press that we had was our downfall. We had too many people using it, and the system fell over. And you don't get a second chance at that. So we believed our own hype, which I certainly wouldn't do again. And I would. This isn't actually a piece of advice from me. This is actually Steve Jobs. Pick up the phone, or alternatively, most people that I come across who've made good inroads into their careers of any kind are more than happy to offer advice. Now, if you're reaching out and asking for money, it's a different thing. But if you ask someone for advice, everybody likes feeling like they've got something to share. And most people are responsive. If they don't reply immediately, it doesn't mean they didn't want to. It just may be that they're really busy. But I would definitely reach out, find whoever it is, the person you want to talk to. You know, Toto Wolff, fine. Like you can find his information, drop him an email. Great. That would be what I would do. Don't hold back on doing that. When I did, and then I eventually got around to doing it, but it took a lot longer. And so I wouldn't do that. Now I would just ask for help. It's easy to say drop the ego. I've, you know, I have been humbled in the last 2 years, and at various points in my career. And I wish that I had less. I was less self-congratulatory and had less of an ego for most of it. And that's what we're trying to do with Humble, is to provide experts without ego, people who want to help, to not tear someone down. And now there's a difference between telling someone they're wrong and their idea is terrible to tearing them down, because some ideas are terrible, some babies are ugly, and sometimes you need to hear it, like you shouldn't be doing this because of these reasons, but there's a way of doing it. And it's very hard to find that in a sea of noise of social media and Google. Very hard to find actual advice, but it is possible to do it. And so I would seek out people who've made mistakes as early as possible.
And assuming, if you think back to your career, that it is worth it, like for you personally, why is it worth all the ups and all the downs?
Well, apart from the fact that I'm, fundamentally unemployable at this point, because having never worked in an office and never, I wouldn't be able to stand it now, I don't think. I also would find it very hard to stop tinkering and do my job. I always want to try and fix a problem. It is absolutely worth it, because we've built some amazing things, and just because they didn't all pan out or they didn't all turn into Uber, it doesn't matter. For me, it's that creative side is definitely worth it. And like I said, seeing that person wearing a t-shirt from one of my companies, I was like, this is just amazing. So for me, that's great. I love helping young entrepreneurs, or inexperienced, I shouldn't say young, inexperienced entrepreneurs, because you could be in your 60s. I find that very gratifying, which is why I teach at Sloan, helping people sort of avoid some of the biggest pitfalls. I've spent 20 years making fantastic mistakes. Hopefully I can stop other people making a few of them as well. So I that's for me one of the reasons I do it, but also the freedom. I'm not going to lie. Being able to work anywhere, having the control of the business, working with amazing people. The team that I've built over the past 4 or 5 years is absolutely stellar, and I think they're amazing. So you do get to work with some truly passionate people, and there is also no greater feeling, I think, than handing. This doesn't happen all the time, but handing an investor back a check for a multiple of what they put in. They're investing in you at the beginning. Like, the idea is great, fine, but they're investing in that person. And those like huge movie checks, like on game shows, I actually got one of those made for my lead investor, and I went up into this golf club with this huge, like 6-foot check, and handed it back to him. And he's like, "Great, but where the hell am I going to cash this?" But obviously, then there was a paper with it. But it was that moment. He was like, "Okay, cool." And he actually, what the amazing thing is, he gave it back. He said, "All right, whatever you're doing next, I'll reinvest it. I don't want it now." So there are moments, and those kind of things make a big difference. What it isn't, though, is that exit. There isn't that exit moment. there is some relief, and they call it, the post-exit stress-free months, weeks, whatever people end up doing. But I found that most career entrepreneurs, within 3 or 4 months, they're like, okay, what are we doing next? Let's do this again. And my wife is like, please stop, just slow down, let's just do one thing for now. Yeah, the flexibility, the freedom, the ability to take an idea out of your own head and put it into the market. And the fear of failure is prevalent within all of us and everything we do every day. But having a business fail, you still did it. You may have made some, clumsy mistakes along the way, but you got out there and you did it. It doesn't mean you have to do it full time, but you're trying to do something that hasn't been done before. That's really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's that whole mentality of like man in the ring, that's actually going out and giving it a go. So I think so often, a lot of us have ideas, but we never really get around to executing them.
Absolutely. But the learning curve is incredibly steep. And so having, giving it a try, it's great, but putting everything on the line first time is probably not the right move.
Yeah. Charlie, you mentioned the role of sort of mentors in your career. Are there any particular moments for you that stand out that were guided by mentors? And in those particular instances, how did you find them?
So there's a network in London called 3Cs. I think it's still going. I was lucky to find that group. There are collaborative angel, I don't mean investment networks. The investment networks, that has a different bias. I would, a supportive business community that will answer the questions of someone at any stage of their career, I think is really important. So how to find them, I don't have a great answer to that. But impactful moments, one stands with me 16 years later, where it put in perspective the education that Radley had given me, which is that Radley is, you get a further higher education at Radley than you do at most American universities, and certainly most schools around the UK. So realizing that you've got a different perspective than the most other people is something that is extremely important to kind of try and hold on to. But one person in particular said, you're not bringing people on the journey. And by that, she meant that I've come up with the solution, or I just assume that everybody can follow along. And that often isn't the case, because we are exposed to brilliant teachers, brilliant peers, an amazing network, and it's easy to fall into the trap of going, oh, of course everybody knows that, and likely they don't. So bringing people along the journey as to why your answer is the right one is really, really important. So that was a big one. Another one, actually, it's a great question. If you're not making a fool of yourself, you're making a fool of yourself. And this would apply to languages primarily, but I still love it. I put it out there like, this is my idea. It's terrible. Okay, thank you very much. If you're not making a fool of yourself, you're making a fool of yourself. Just get out there. Just do it, try it, see what happens. But don't put everything on the line.
Nice. I've got a question here around, if you've got an idea and you're in that kind of ideation stage, what kind of advice did you have around bringing on a co-founder, or I guess bringing on another partner early on?
I get asked this question a lot. I do monthly office hours, which are open to anyone on the call, by the way. And I'll share the details with Caroline. The co-founder dilemma is a really, really big one. And at this stage in my career, I would never bring in an equal co-founder. Firstly, it's never equal. Now, the whole 50-50 thing is a myth, because at various stages of the business, someone will be working harder, someone will be doing different things, someone will be doing something that matters more. And you also eventually need somebody to be ultimately responsible and make a decision. So 50-50 doesn't work. The other challenge that people, and you see with things like these accelerators like Y Combinator, they want you to have a co-founder. Now, statistically, the most successful startups are launched by people who are 43 and are solo founders. That's the data shows that. That doesn't mean it's not possible to do it other ways. The solo founder bit means that someone is steering the ship. And the biggest mistake that I see people make is they say, oh, I need a technical co-founder. You are literally marrying this person. And to just put it on a forum and say, I need a technical co-founder, it doesn't make any sense, because you are taking on a huge amount of responsibility and sharing work and ambition for the next 5, 6, 10 years. And it isn't something that should be done lightly. I don't think co-founders should be friends. I think that there needs to be I think they may become friends, but just because you trust someone doesn't mean they're trustworthy. And when money gets involved, it's very easy at the beginning to say, when there's no money actually on the line, to say, oh yeah, cool, great, you take this percent, would you do this? And then when actually money gets involved and power starts to distort people's belief systems, then it all becomes very messy. So finding someone, acknowledging that you are going along for the long haul, especially on a technical platform. If you're not technical and you're commercial or you're charismatic, whatever it needs to be, hiring someone to build the platform or build your technology is normally the better way to do it. And you can find a co-founder at any stage of the business. There's one of the companies that I mentor for, Capital Factory, it's been going for 20 years, and one of my mates just joined as co-founder 3 years ago. The founder, the president, was like, right, actually, I need this skill set. I'm going to honor him with this title. And sometimes that's all it is. It doesn't have to be equal equity. Co-founders, we've got 2 co-founders of Humble, but they're part of my team, and we're rewarded with that title and some equity, but not control of the business. So it is a marriage. Hire someone technical versus bring them in as a co-founder. I know that it's tempting to say, well, we haven't got any money, therefore I'll give you equity, but you're really distorting the power dynamic and the journey further down the line. Because if you're commercial and they're technical and they're building a product, technically they have more power than you, because they can build it and you can't. So be very careful with that, and don't found things with friends and family.
Thanks, Charlie. I think on that as well, co-founder conflict is one of the core reasons why startups kind of blow up.
Absolutely, it's
well.
about 60%.
So
60%, and on that, actually, sorry, investors are now taking a lot more notice. If they're putting 10 million into something and the founders are fighting, it's the surest way to lose 10 million. And you see a lot of mental health resources being made available to founders, because if their head isn't in the game, they're not paying. Also pay, right? There's in early stages, there's a very big difference between giving yourself $1 million a month and making sure the bills are paid. If the bills aren't paid and you're worried about money, you're not focused, and so you have to pay yourself. You have to find a way to do it, and it's not a real business if you're not getting paid.
Absolutely. Charlie, we're at time there. So
really?
Thank you so much for your time. I'll hand back to Caroline to wrap up.
Yeah, thank you. I
Fantastic.
just wanted to, thanks, Charlie. I just wanted to say that was an absolutely fascinating insight. It was your emotional honesty, actually, that was really powerful for all of us. Not sugarcoating the whole experience is really quite refreshing, because it is a challenging and rewarding one. And thanks to Rory as well. You were fantastic at interviewing Charlie and fielding all those questions. So thank you to both of you. I know how busy you are, and it's really appreciated. And this video will go on and be used many times in the future by those that follow in your footsteps. For everyone else, thanks for joining us this evening. I hope you found this valuable. Our next Beyond Radley talk will be next term. So look out for our email newsletters, and we'll be in touch with the details. But thank you and have a lovely evening.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.